Lisa, do you have? Well, our first page, we don't need a picture of it. It's the table of contents, and I went ahead and just prepared it from scratch based upon my personal experience. I'm hoping that this training would be more of a practical guide and sort of sharing what things that may come up as well as what's required from the audit. And so our first page, if you want to go down to page 1, is how to conduct a financial audit and the purpose of the audit. And our purpose is to review the financial records, keeping in mind all the good internal control procedures and testing compliance with those approved policies and procedures. And we know that the PTA has no shortage of policies and procedures, so we know that there's plenty of procedures out there, but we're testing the implementation of those procedures. In the last 2 nights, we've had treasurer training, and this was aimed at helping our units learn how to implement those procedures. And then during the audit, we test the unit's compliance with those procedures. And also, we review the board and associated meeting minutes and treasury reports presented in the meetings to reasonably ensure that funds are spent in accordance with membership wishes. And you may see, I will probably use the word reasonably quite a bit because that's what we're doing. We're reasonably ensuring, we're reasonably safeguarding PTA assets. We're going by our action plan, our checklist, and the independence of the auditor is crucial. As auditors, we read the information, we read the documentation. We do not personalize it. We do not use people's names or anything like that. It's merely stating what's on the documentation, and maybe more importantly, in some cases, the documentation that's missing may tell us a lot of information also. But we'll talk more about that during the audit findings and recommendations. The audit timeline, in your bylaws, it will specify that the audit must be done twice a year, once from dates from July 1st through December 31st, and the second one is January 1st through June 30th. Additional audits may be required if a check signer leaves or bank accounts are closed in order to safeguard the assets and to help our officers. We want to conduct an audit so that everything is in order before a new person starts. There is a recommended benchmark of 2 weeks after receipt of the information from the treasurer to complete the audit, but we know that that varies based upon the complexity of the audit, the size of the operation, and you know, some units may have 100 transactions, 100, and other units may have a few. So that varies, but when you do receive the information, it is recommended that you work on it right away and it just doesn't sit on the dining table. Separate audits must be prepared for each bank account, and we'll talk about that when we get to the audit report, but each checking and savings account must have a separate audit as well as PayPal, because PayPal is a payment processor in which we draw down funds, and so it operates kind of like a bank account. Square, Totem, all the e-commerce transactions would be on a checking or savings account and would have a separate audit. This has changed this year somewhat who conducts the audit, and the PTA auditor is either elected or appointed by your per your bylaws. So if you have already been elected and appointed, that's great. If your unit does not have an auditor, then one may be appointed in the new year, which we're already in the new year, and should be approved in the September association meeting. It's important to know, and I think I've covered it in the next slide, is that The auditor, ordinarily, the president appoints people and the board will approve, but because the president is a check signer, then the auditor and the review committee that we're going to talk about will be nominated by the board and approved by the association. So the outgoing auditor is responsible for the year-end audit. If they do not do that, if it's not completed, the new year audit or an audit committee maybe do it, but of course the treasurer cannot be on that committee or to be the auditor if they were the treasurer in the prior year. And then we're going to talk about the audit committee, and a professional accountant or firm may be engaged, just to talk about if you engage a professional accountant, that you should review the scope of work, because they might sell you an audit in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles or GAAP or something of that nature. So we have our own audit program. It's more of an internal control review that we would want them to do. And you may get a statement ahead of time with the scope of work and the amount it will cost and turnaround time. Okay. So now we're going to go down to the Audit Review Committee. This is a new requirement this year. It's on page 26 of your insurance thing. And it says it's for the Fidelity Bond Commercial Crime. And it says, in order for Fidelity Bond coverage to apply to your organization, you must comply with the following requirements. Your organization must conduct an annual audit or review of the books by an audit review committee or qualified accountant. So this is not something that the PTA has dreamt up. This is a requirement from the insurance company. So if the auditor, and these are questions that came up while we were trying to implement this. We've studied this a lot because the insurance company did not specify other than what I just read. So they didn't specify the scope of work or who should be on the review committee as far as, you know, people that they feel are qualified. But the qualified accountant is the auditor that has training in auditing, has done the job as a CPA, preferably in the public sector. So if you have a person that will volunteer, or you yourself, that you are a CPA or you have auditing experience as an accountant, as a qualified accountant, then work experience, then that can count toward a qualified accountant, and you won't need a review committee, an audit review committee. If you're an auditor that is not experienced in auditing and or a CPA, then you can use the audit review committee. And the audit review committee is composed at least of 2 people. One may be the auditor, and the other one should be, again, nominated by the board and approved by the association, and they must be a member of that association. And the review committee, and someone had said before, you should really have 3 in case you need a tiebreaker, because you may have discussions about the audit, and you know, one may be for it, one may be against a certain element of it, and so it's good maybe to have a 3rd person. And then there was a question, can the council or district auditor act as a review committee without being a member of the association? And yes, so if you're an auditor and you don't have anyone to volunteer to be on your review committee, you may enlist the services of your council auditor to be your review committee. We went through the board appointments, that the president does not appoint the auditor or the audit committee. The audit review committee may not be related by blood, marriage, or cohabitation to any financial team or the auditor. So they have to be independent of the auditor and your treasurer, financial secretary. That's your financial team. Could you go down a little bit lower? Thank you. And then they asked, should the review committee have training? That would be awesome. That would be great. It's not necessary. They don't have to go through the training, but it would be nice if they would like to know, what they be a future auditor, maybe. As I said, the scope of work was not, what was that? The scope of work is not specified by the insurance company. So at a minimum, the review committee, they do not have to redo the audit. They could, at a minimum, verify the beginning and ending balances and any calculations, and then review the findings and recommendations if there are any. It would be nice to maybe get a second opinion of the findings and recommendations. They may do a random sampling if they like, but they do not redo the entire audit. And then we went through who's qualified as an accountant, and I think we did the last one too. The counselor of if the counselor or district officer is not qualified accountant, then an audit review committee is required. So we have our awesome volunteers who've been auditors for years with the PTA, but that doesn't qualify you as a qualified accountant. So they would need a review committee. Okay. Go down.
I'm actually going to stop sharing for a second because I don't know how that blue mark showed up there, and I don't know how to get rid of it. It's a little distracting. So
while we're waiting, we have a question in the chat box. We have a few, but how should the audit review committee members be recruited? And should the auditor, off the chat.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay. Should the auditor recruit the additional members?
I think that it's like any other position. People may want to nominate names. The board would be looking for this position, so board members can go out and ask if anybody wants to be on the review committee. It could be another board member that that may want to have the position, like, fundraiser or something like that, another position that's not related to the financial team. What was the other question?
Should the auditor recruit the additional members?
Oh, like I said, anyone can recruit anyone that may want to be on the review committee. It's sort of like looking for the auditor. You went out there and asked, do you want to be, so maybe you start at your board and ask if they know of anyone or if anyone wants to be on the review committee. And then it's the board recommendation that goes to the association anyway. So you may go to your association meeting and say, hey, we need a review committee for the audit. Is anyone interested? So
we have a couple more questions, but I think we'll let you get back to your presentation. We'll be taking questions at around 7.
Okay, so the audit checklist. Let's go down to the audit checklist and then okay, there it is. This is your action plan. The top of the checklist are items that you as auditor will check off as received from the treasurer. These are the items that are required. I would recommend that since COVID, there's no, personal handoff. But as soon as you receive the items or the package from the treasurer, which hopefully is in good shape, that you check off and make sure that you've gotten those items up front. One time there was a binder saying it was 18-19 minutes, and it was really 17-18. So you want to make sure that you have all the information, and it is what the treasurer says it is. And do it in email, in writing. Nothing happens if it's not in writing. So send an email to the treasurer saying, oh, I'm missing this or that. And this will help you down the line, because I've seen where things have gone missing and then they sort of just blame each other. So you want to make sure that you receipt the items that you've gotten from the treasurer, and the treasurer knows that you have them. And if there's anything missing, you have it in the email that something is missing. So if we go down, then the second part, beginning with the balance records, this is what you call an action plan or an audit program. And these are the items that you check off as you're looking at the documentation. The last 2 days of the treasurer training has said that, for example, a check request needs, proper signatures and receipts, and cash verification forms needs 2 signers. So this is the list of everything that they have been trained on what they need. And all you're doing is checking off to make sure that they are in compliance with what they need, with all the policies and procedures of PTA. So there are highlighted some new things here in case we have some returning auditors. Everything that's highlighted is new. And just to take the big one, the non-applicable column is new. And this applies to if you don't have committees or you didn't have events, then it's really not applicable. And if you don't have a financial secretary, then financial secretaries are reports are not applicable. Okay, and the committee reports. Okay, so if we start in the beginning balance, this is you're verifying that the beginning balance of your new audit reconciles with the ending balance of the prior year audit. You cannot go forward at all until you have a beginning balance that is the same as the ending balance of the previous audit. Okay. As far as bank reconciliations, this is new, the first 2, and I'd like to read from page 26 of the insurance policy regarding the fidelity bond. The second item that they require, besides the audit review committee, is that the monthly bank reconciliations must be reviewed and signed by someone who does not have authorization to sign checks. Financial software does not qualify under this requirement. So you want to make sure of those 2 that's highlighted, that a non-check signer opens the bank statements and reviews them and signs off on them before giving it to the treasurer. Because there were instances where bank statements may be changed by the treasurer before, when they were requested, somehow it was changed. So it's just good also for a non-check signer to review it to see if there's anything unusual. Like if they think there's supposed to be $5,000 in an account and there's only $2,000, that may be some kind of red flag that they want to look at, or any unusual, for example, a PayPal, maybe a PayPal item that is paying from PayPal. We're not supposed to be paying from PayPal, so they might want to see that on the e-commerce account. And all bank statements, reconciled by the treasurer and views signed and dated monthly by a non-check signer. So when they prepare the bank reconciliation, and we're going to look at all of these different types of forms, it must be signed and dated by the preparer and a reviewer. This is the only reconciliation that needs to be looked at by a reviewer that is not related, to the treasurer by blood or cohabitation. The auditor would be an awesome reviewer of the bank reconciliation, and that would be great. Okay. Also, what's new is electronic payments and deposited, recorded in the checkbook, register, and ledger. A lot of units that I've seen, they prepare their treasury reports, but they don't include bank adjustments. And we know we have our cash verification forms and our check requests, and that goes on a treasury report. We're going to look on that. But also we need to do the bank adjustments as well. So you want to make sure all of those are recorded, and we're going to look at that later also. And then membership, we want to make sure that any members received have been remitted. That should equal 0. So there's a portion of membership that does not belong to the unit. It's called per capita membership. And we have to make sure that that's passed forward to the council or the district. So that's something that will be checked to make sure that those are all remitted. Also, the minutes is kind of new, and they would include also the treasury reports that were presented at the meeting. So as far as treasury reports, and it said on the top, Treasury Reports Board and Association. These are treasury reports that were run for the board or association meetings. And so you may have a treasury report from January 23rd to February 22nd. And that's because you want the most up-to-date information given to your board and association. This is internal reporting only. This is just to like I say, give the most current information and to substantiate the minutes as far as the financial records are concerned. But you would still have to get a month-end treasurer report to reconcile to the bank, because the bank period is usually monthly, from the 1st of the month to the 30th of the month. So you're going to need a treasury report also that covers the month, the accounting period, which is monthly. Okay. Okay, I think we went through most everything. And
Okay, I have a couple questions for you.
okay.
Is the auditor supposed to work with the outgoing or the incoming treasurer?
You don't work with any treasurer whatsoever. You receive the information from the treasurer and then you do your audit. So the only interaction you will have with the treasurer is who's ever passing you the books. And the book should include all the items that we listed at the top. And as soon as you have that information, then you do your work, and you should be independent. And any interaction with any treasurer, I would recommend, it's not required, but I would recommend that it be through email so that it would be written down. But as far as saying, oh, I found this, what do you think? No, well, we don't want to do that. You're just writing down what you see. An audit is an auditor's opinion. So it is your independent, non-personal opinion of what you're reading, the documentation that you're looking at, and comparing it to the audit plan, the audit checklist.
Thank you. What if we don't get monthly bank statements mailed? We only have electronic statements from the bank.
Yeah, that's fine. Most units have online banking, and so you may have the auditor yourself request the bank statements, maybe just have access to request bank statements online, and they can look at them and then pass them to the treasurer and sign them. You have to sign and date them.
Yeah, just to expand on that, our insurance company wants bank statements reviewed monthly by a non-check signer, and noted that they've been reviewed. I guess in some devious areas of the state, who knows where, someone got access to the bank statement and was able to alter it so nobody knew that it was, not the original bank statement. So they always want a non-check signer to download the bank statement, if that's the way you're getting them, and review them, and then, I don't want to say sign off on them, but acknowledge that you've reviewed them and you haven't seen anything, outrageous like single signatures, etc. There was another question. Oh, when is the new checklist effective? Someone's concerned that they're
right now. We can use it, because the insurance company is requiring it, and I think we should use the new checklist, even though it's for prior year 6 months, the requirement went into effect, I think, in February or sometime like that. So the insurance requirement was effective in prior year.
Back to the issue about the current, utilizing the current audit checklist. This person was concerned that the outgoing treasurer possibly has not been preparing bank reconciliation.
That would be a finding. Whatever you can get from the treasurer is what you can get from the treasurer. And then your report of findings and recommendations would be prepared accordingly, and that would be a finding.
Okay, so then somebody wanted clarification. The auditor downloads and prints the statement first, signs and scans and emails to the treasurer. Is that correct?
Yes, that would work.
Okay, and then someone said, I'm confused because I thought we were supposed to do an audit twice a year, but it sounds like we actually are doing one monthly by reviewing the bank statement. And that is correct. That's something that we call a 5-minute audit. And that just kind of keeps your unit on top of it. It's like, things don't go a full 6 months and then it's discovered, oh my gosh, there was this bizarre habit that occurred in the account. Nobody knows what it is.
And we mentioned to the treasurers last night, I think, that an audit for them should not be twice a year. It should be every month. And I advise them to use this audit checklist and look at their monthly documentation. And then you should be receiving it either by month in a binder altogether, or I prefer, but that's just me, that all the cash verification forms are in one spot and all the check requests are in one spot. That's something you can work out with your treasurer on how you want to receive the documentation, and they may do it or not do it, or you may just get it in a plain brown bag. We've done that. It depends. We've gotten in different states of preparedness. So you work with what you have, and that's all you can do.
And then someone else was looking for another clarification. I think some other non-signer reviews and signs it, but it can be the auditor. Just any non-check signer can be assigned to review the bank statement monthly. I know years ago at 33rd, I think it was the director of leadership, because she was always in the office. She had quicker access. This, of course, was before electronics. But she would come into the office and review the bank statement every month.
Right. Any non-check signer and not related to the non-check signers.
But it definitely makes, I think, the auditor's job easier if they're the one that's doing it, because they know they've already looked through this. They don't have to, restudy it.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions? We are a little ahead of schedule. That's wonderful.
Okay. Good. So we can go to page 5.
Oh, here's another question just popped up. Sorry.
Okay.
Does the non-signer who's reviewing the monthly bank statements have to be approved by the board?
No, I don't think that. I mean, you can if you want to. If you want to make sure that the board approves the person, wants to approve the person that's signing the bank rec. I haven't done it, but that's something your board can vote on anything. So yeah, you can do that.
I think it's a good, transparent, documented in your minutes as to who's going to be your non-check signer reviewer of the bank statement. I think it's good, so everybody knows what's going on.
Yeah.
And let's see. Oh, sorry, we got 2 more. Does it have to be the same person each month?
No. But if you selected somebody and the board has approved that person, then yes, it has to be the same person. But if your board hasn't specified a particular person, then it doesn't have to be the same person.
And then don't we have to get board approval to get internet access to the statement?
If you like.
I
think that because they were charging $3, this is what I know, because they were charging $3 for the paper statement, we did bring it up to the board that we would like not to receive the paper statements anymore and to go with the online banking. And yeah, that was, yeah. Approved.
Okay, one other one. Person who does the monthly bank reconciliation has to be ratified by the association as stated in the bylaws. That's interesting. We'll
Yeah, the
review
bank
that, Francis.
reconciliation is usually done by the treasurer. Is that what you mean? The preparer of the bank reconciliation is the treasurer, and then you have the reviewer.
Yeah, this is. I'll have to look. I'll look this up because I'm not certain about that.
Okay. So the cash verification form. This is an older form. There's a new one that was put in the toolkit in June. I kind of like this, and this is the form you're going to be looking at when and auditing, as far as receiving cash and checks in person and not counting, counting with two people. I kind of like the startup cash only because I've seen units forget that they have startup cash and they deposit it with the Carnival income. And we really don't want to do that. We want to make sure that startup cash is deposited separately so that we know, first of all, that Carnival income is correct, and secondly, that the startup cash was returned. So, but that's, that's just me. It's not on the cash verification form, but I would make a note of that when you're doing your cash verification form and you give the startup cash, or the treasurer gives the startup cash, that they make a note of that. Okay, and then further down, this, like I said, this is an example of a cash verification form that you will be looking at, and it would give the activity, and at the bottom, you should see two signatures for the same date, because people should never count alone. Ordinarily, in regular times, for example, you have a carnival, they may count the money initially and then may put in a lockbox. It would be nice to get it in the bank right away, but should monies be in the lockbox, then the financial secretary, if you have one, or the treasurer will be the third and fourth signatures, because they can't count alone, but they should count it again, because I've seen where the count has been incorrect. And so it would be good prior to depositing the money for the financial secretary or treasurer to count it also. Okay. And another thing, and we'll go through the treasurer's report, but make a note of the cash verification forms as far as what it's for. This one is for membership. I've seen on treasurer reports where they've reported, let's say it's membership on the cash verification form, but it may say Carnival on the treasurer's report. So you want to verify that also, the cash verification form against the treasurer reports. Ordinarily, it's not an issue if you have financial software, and ordinarily it's input correctly, but I've seen it with smaller units that use Excel or still do their books manually. They may make that error, so you want to make sure that all the cash verification forms are reflected correctly on the treasury report, which is what we're going to look at in a bit. Okay. Going down. Okay, and this is the check payment authorization or request for reimbursement. And this is when a person expends money on behalf of the unit and they're requesting reimbursement. I made this example of teacher appreciation. The chairperson has spent money on food and decorations for the teacher appreciation lunch. Receipts, preferably original receipts, but also we know if people are buying things on Amazon, then the Amazon invoice would do. But you will need receipts or invoices to equal the amount that's being claimed. So they have to prove that they spent this much money. It's good to review also, if you can, the receipt to make sure that it's for, food or decorations and not, like, something personal that may have gotten on the receipt. Sometimes people buy things and they get something personal and then they include it in the receipt, and we want to make sure that all those expenses went to the fall teacher appreciation lunch. signature by the chairperson and the requester. The only required signatures on the check authorization form is the president, because they have to authorize the expenditure, and the recording secretary, because they will check off the membership approved activity and funds were released and executive board approved it according to the minutes, because they take the minutes and so they know if things have been approved. So they're saying yes. The secretary is saying, yes, this has been approved, and we can go ahead and give this person the reimbursement. And then you want to make sure the check number is correct. Hopefully they put the check number and then the amount. What else do I want to say? I think that's it. Okay. So that's the form that you're going to be using for check requests, disbursements. Okay, so we're going down now. This is an example of a monthly treasury report. This is what you should be getting from the treasurer, and it shows the beginning balance. This one is a month, November, and the beginning balance is $4,250, and that should be the same as the ending balance on the treasury report as of October 31st. So you want to make sure, it's just like the audit, that ending and beginning balances are equal. Okay, and then you'll see my my deposit there was for $100 for membership. You want to make sure that the treasurer is breaking down memberships between the membership dues that belongs to the unit, which is usually $10, and then $4.95 would be the unit portion. So that's under income is $49.50. And then you want to look under funds not belonging to the unit. They should include this line item because it's transitory, it's not your money, and that's the $50.50, which is the $5.05 that should be remitted to the council. If we go down a little bit, you'll see where the check, there, right there. Under the expenses part, you'll see the bottom funds not belonging to the unit, and that should be a check to the council, and you'll see it's for $50.50. So those transactions would equal zero. And then in your deposits, you may have family dinner nights or fall fundraiser. You want to see that those line items are specified according to the budget. They should be your budget line items. And then these are, I tried to use a variety of bank adjustments. A lot of units use totem. This is where you would post totem, or you would make sure that the treasurer posts totem under income as a bank adjustment. And it would be nice to have a sequential number for those bank adjustments. I know in PTA Easy, they do have a sequential number. And even on your cash verification forms, it may not call for a number, but I really like, like seeing a number so that we know that things are not skipped. So our 501 adjustment is for total membership, and then square sales. And I want to make sure, or you want to make sure as the auditor, that square sales, the total gross income is posted. For example, this sale was $75. But they're going to see on their bank statement or on their square sales report $73.50, for example. You want to make sure that they're posting the gross sale to income as $75, and then you'll look toward the bottom there under bank adjustments for expenses. There's a square sales fee of $1.50. So the $73.50 is composed of the sale, and you have to record the fee as an expense. So if they're reporting $73.50 as income, that would be incorrect. You want to recognize the expense. Also, in case there's a bank deposit correction, that would be posted there. We're saying like $2 that maybe a bank deposit was incorrect and there was $2 more. And Amazon Smile, and then a return check by the bank. You want to make sure that the amount of the check reduces income. And so there's a $50 return check, And so under income, there's a bank adjustment which reduces income. And then you'll look at the bottom under expenses. There's a bank adjustment for the bank fee for the return check, and that's an expense. And that's the $10 that would be posted there. So actually, they've taken $60 out of your unit bank account for this dishonored check. And so you want to make sure also as the auditor that they have pursued the writer of the check. You want to make sure that that the person that wrote the bad check has reimbursed the unit. And so when the person pays the $60 in cash, you want to make sure to increase income by $50 and abate the expense. In other words, take the $10 out of the bank fee because that has been reimbursed. Okay. Then under expenses, you'll have your checks. And there we see a teacher appreciation check for $325, and that's the one that we saw before and the check request that we saw before. And I wanted to put a voided check. This is where they should be including their voided checks, and that would be the $325 taking it out, and then we've issued a replacement check. So you want to make sure they're making that clear, that there is a replacement check and the other check has been lost, and they're recording that. Ordinarily, you would have to place a stop payment on the check, and that's usually about $15. So, yeah, there's that. The bank service charge would go under expenses as a bank adjustment. And then also you may have a situation where a check clears the bank for a little bit different amount than what you wrote it for. So I put in like 45 cents, and so I would record that. I'm sorry, you want to make sure that treasurer records that as an increase in expense of 45 cents. Okay, it's not worth really pursuing. Okay, and then, okay. Okay, and then number 8 before, okay, page 8. And then you're going to see the beginning balance. This is our bank statement. So I made up a bank statement, and you're going to see the beginning balance is $4,500, whereas the treasury report was $4,250. I wanted to make sure that that you see that sometimes these amounts are not the same because of a prior month check. You may have current month checks that they're accounting for. When I say you, I mean the unit, the treasurer, that you want to check to see that there's prior month checks that have not cleared the bank yet. So we have deposits, and this is based on the treasury report that we just saw. I wanted to make sure that it was the same. So when you go back and look at these things, you can see how they relate. I tried to do entries that would relate to the treasury report relate to the bank statement. So this is what the bank statement would look at, and there's the deposits, and of course the $100 would just be $100. They're not worried about splitting it, you know, memberships. And there's the square sale, that's $73.50 because that is the net of the square sale, but we know on the treasury report we want to break that out between gross sales and a fee expense. And there's the same for Amazon Smile. And there's the check for $325.45. Remember I said that the teacher appreciation check was $325, but they cashed it for $325.45. So that's how you're going to see that there was a difference that you have to make sure they reported on the treasury reports in their books. And there's the return check fee, and the return check is always posted as a check or debit on the bank statement. Okay, so we're going to go down. This is the bank reconciliation, and I'm thinking I should have flipped that, but it's the same information. You start out with the treasury report, and these are the 2 checks that are still outstanding, and then your bank balance should be the $13,626 because those 2 checks have not cleared yet, and one was cut in October. So you want to make sure that they include in their bank reconciliation checks that weren't necessarily cut in the same month. And this is where you would also check for stale dated checks. If check is over 3 months old and hasn't been cashed, you need to pursue that with the treasurer, or put it as a finding, observation, that they need to make sure that they're looking at the stale dated checks to make sure that they're not carried forward. I've seen stale dated checks for like a year, that's been carried forward. So that's something that needs to be addressed also. Okay, and there's the prepared by and reviewed by. So the bank reconciliation would be prepared usually by the treasurer and dated, and then reviewed by, and as we discussed, that could be a person that the board selects, or the auditor, or just a second signature that's not on the financial team or related to check signers. Okay. And the date is very important because you want to make sure they're doing it in a timely manner. Okay, and then the last one before we take a break for questions. On your audit checklist, you're going to see that a ledger needs to be prepared. And this one is by transaction number. And I've put the heading of the categories the same as an annual report that the treasurer prepares, but you just want to make sure that they've included all of the checks and deposits, and you'll see at the bottom that those numbers reconcile to the treasurer's report and the bank statements. So there's the 4250. And the 962685 is the same. I've highlighted the non-unit portion of the memberships, so that there's $50.50 that's recorded as income and $50.50 recorded as expense. Okay. And I know that a lot of this information is in financial software that people use, PTAs and whatnot. So you may want to consider, or they may download the information as far as the account name and amount, that information from their system, and then just input the other categories. These are the tax categories. Okay, so I think that brings us to any other questions?
Yeah, let me see. I am not muted. Good. Okay. So there was a question. Francis was having a question about who needs to be ratified, etc. And I'm starting to lose her circle. So Francis, can you unmute yourself and ask your question directly of Flora?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, thanks.
Hi, I understand in the bylaws in that section 8 under the, they added in June 2019 in the bylaws that the monthly bank reconciliator has to be ratified by the association, right? So that's person who's not a check signer. So in our school, we have the auditor do it, which you guys are recommending. And so we also added the auditor as in our standing rules to be that monthly reviewer. So do we still have to ratify that person at the association?
No, if it's in your standing rules, I don't think you have to approve at the board or association, because they already approved the standing rules.
Okay, so
Yeah.
if the person if that reviewer is not the auditor, then you do have to ratify it at the association, correct?
If it's not specified in your standing rules that there's another person or whatever.
Okay.
Yeah, and I'm saying the treasurer usually prepares the bank reconciliation because they are familiar with all the information, and you pretty much pull it off your system if you're on a financial system, but we also have to address the units that are not and do it manually. But that's why it's approved or reviewed by a non-check signer. So they're not like just doing it on their own, they're just preparing it, but it needs to be approved or reviewed by a non-check signer.
Right. So that person has to be still ratified by the association.
It can be, sure.
I guess I was a
Yeah.
little confused because, yeah, no, because in the bylaws, I was looking at it and it says, I guess Article 8, Section 2 says, item H says, appoint a member ratified by the association who's not a check signer to review the monthly bank reconciliation. So,
Okay,
yeah. So I was just
good.
wanted to clarify that.
Okay, good. Yes, that's
Okay.
good to know. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Also, there was one person that was saying that some of this type is pretty tiny. And Lisa was saying that she would need to stop screen sharing and make it larger, but
I think I just wanted to show you an example of a ledger report because it says in the audit checklist that you receive a ledger report. So the headings can be different. I prefer these headings because it relates to another report that has to be prepared. And so we did train our treasurers or to do that as far as Long Beach is concerned. Okay. So, but the example is in your handout, and I guess you can refer to it from there.
there's another question, Flora, about this is a person that is new as an auditor, and she's asking, what are our first steps as auditors? How do we start?
Okay, so first, as I said before, you want to check in all of the information. You want to use, and you are, as the auditor, will complete the audit report, which we're going to look at in a bit, and the audit checklist. So on the audit checklist, make sure you have the information that the treasurer has given you. Check it off. You may not get everything. Do not check anything that you didn't get, and that will probably be a finding later on. And then you want to look in your binder and see, well, how did they separate these out? What I do is I look at all the forms first, like the cash verification forms. So I know, and I'm going to look in my audit checklist, what's required on the cash verification forms. And I will go through them one by one, make sure that all the signatures are there, to make sure that the event is specified, and to compare it to the treasury report that, yes, this was a deposit, because we're going to look at the bank reconciliation. The bank reconciliation reconciles to the treasury report. So you want to make sure on the treasury report that lists all the deposits that those are made. And you would look in the bank statement that you should be getting and checking off all those cash verification forms as deposits. Then I would say look at the check request. And every auditor is different. You'll find what feels good to you. A lot of people do it by month. But then I would look at all the check requests, make sure all the receipts are there. And so look at each document, to make sure that everything there. And they said to check off as you go on your checklist so you won't get mixed up on what you've looked at and what you haven't looked at. And yeah, go from there. And then I just keep a pad of notes of what's missing. Like I would say, and we'll go through the findings and recommendations, but if receipts are missing and it's kind of chronic, like you made a note like this check request or receipts are missing, then you come across another one, I would make notes of those because that may be a finding as they are not being that careful and, for example, gathering receipts for check requests. Or check requests are missing. You may see on a treasury report that there is a check and you can't find a check request for it. So you want to make a notation of that. That's a finding also. And
There's a question, Flora, about the auditor for this new term, who audits the books ending June 30th if you had an elected officer then versus the new elected officer?
Yeah, the outgoing auditor should really prepare the audit for prior year for as of June 30th. They may not have hung around. They may be missing an action. You may not have one. So I would say the new auditor or an audit committee can do it, but the audit committee, as I said, has to be a person that will sign as the auditor and do it. It's just as long as the treasurer of the prior year is not the auditor for the next year. Then you
As
can't use the auditor because they would be auditing their own books.
Yeah, as well as the outgoing treasurer is not the incoming auditor.
Yeah, that's what I just said.
Oh,
Yeah,
you
that'd
did.
be kind of weird, you know?
Yeah, and I have had people ask me that question.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, you can't audit your own books, so, yeah.
well, okay, I think that's it. There was just a question that came up, but I think that person's now gotten clear.
Okay, now we're gonna come to the audit report. And I guess we can look at the real one and then this just explains. Okay, so the audit report for your more experienced auditors has changed a bit, but this is the audit report you're going to be preparing based upon the documentation you received, your bank reconciliations and treasurer's reports. You're going to put the unit name, and all this is specified. What's new for our older audits is the account name. It used to be the account number, but now they want you to write the account name. There should be an audit report for each bank account. So under the account name, you may have checking, and then you may have another one's for savings and another one for PayPal. So you want to make sure that you specify in each audit report the account name, and you pick a name. Checking 1, checking 2, whatever is identifiable for you.
Flora, can I just interrupt for a moment? I wanted to reiterate what State mentioned in their presentation about the IRS EIN. I know I have seen several units be very reticent about plugging in the IRS EIN number into the audit report, so they'll leave it blank. State assures us that our EIN numbers are public record, so please enter your IRS EIN number so that we know as we're reviewing them, whether it's at the council or at district, that you are aware of your correct EIN number. We have had instances where auditors have completed audit reports and are using a completely different name, not completely, but a different name other than the legal name of the unit. And we want to assure that the auditor is, auditing the books and the books have the right EIN number.
Okay, great. Thanks, Lena. And then new also is the membership dues, and you look this up in your bylaws, and it will state the amount of dues that you should be charging. It's usually $10, but check your bylaws to make sure. Sometimes it's $7, $12. And then total memberships year to date. These are the memberships that have been received. And remember we talked about memberships received and remitted. It should be the same. E-memberships, they're very big into total, but I believe this would be any membership. So you may have memberships processed through Square also, or some other payment processors, whereas Totem, so I would include all membership year to date in that particular number. And I would say the number of e-memberships is included in total memberships year to date. Okay, this particular audit, I just put it for a month because that was my example, but the dates covered would be usually January 1st through June 30th and July 1st through December 31st, unless you're having an audit because someone's left or the bank account is closed. So we can pretend that someone left on October 31st and or November 30th and they started November 1st, but that's just an example. So and then we would put the check numbers that were reviewed in the audit. So you want to make sure that your beginning check is the check after the ending check of your prior audit. So if your prior audit went up to 3074, you want to make sure that your first check for this audit is 3075. And then you would input your balance on hand as of the last audit. So I put October 31st because that's the day before November 1st. And the 4250, that should look familiar to you. That's the same figure that's on the treasurer report and bank reconciliations. And I just want to say at this point that all of these reports, the audit report, the bank rec, the treasurer report, they all should reconcile to the other because it's all the same information. It's all, the checks and bank adjustments and deposits. It's all the same information, just put into a different format. But the ending balance should be the same for the treasurer report and the bank rec and the audit. And so receipts, and this all reconciles to the ledger report that we just looked at. And I'm including these so that you can look at it later and sort of relate what goes where. And so the balance on hand should look familiar as a 26 or the 962685. So this part of the audit report is an accumulation ordinarily of 6 months of treasury reports. So if it's January 1st through June 30th, this should be your treasury reports total from that time if you add up your treasury reports. Okay. And then the bank reconciliation is the last bank reconciliation of the period. So if this audit was as of June 30th, then this would be your bank reconciliation that you have for June. And so you will see in the uncleared checks, those same ones, which is, the one that was cut in October, the 250, and then the fundraising one. So, and you want to make sure that the balance on hand, the starred items are exactly the same. Otherwise, something is wrong, something is off, and you have to recheck that. So you want to make sure that those starred items are equal. Okay. Then there at the bottom, and we're going to talk about presenting the audit in a bit. But you would just fill out that I have examined the financial records of the treasurer of, and then you would put in your unit name. And then you would check off one of these items. So you've already done your findings and recommendations, which we're going to talk about. And so you're going to select a category. If it's correct, if the audit balances, and there's just a couple of human errors, you have to exercise judgment here. If they have, and I think I wrote it here, if they have 50 check requests that's been signed and one hasn't, then it's possible that that was just missed, but internal controls are in place, and I think, PTA assets are safeguarded, so that may not be worth mentioning as a finding, or it may be mentioned just as an observation, because you have to consider these are volunteers that we're auditing, they're not employees. And, they take it a little personally. And so you want to make sure that you're reporting correctly, that there's any findings, but you also don't want to be too picky and then they get, feelings hurt. And you just want to make a judgment call as if something is finding worthy or not. But the point is that you want to reasonably ensure that the information is correct and that PTA assets are safeguarded. So substantially correct with attached recommendations and findings. So this is what you would check off if you have several findings. Like, for example, some check requests are missing, they didn't turn in their minutes, bank recs are missing. If there's things that, it seems like they're not following the rules, they're not exercising care. And it's important at this point too, to see if training is a possibility. So you may put in your recommendations or in your auditor's opinion letter that, yes, all these things are missing, and it looks like they're doing the same thing wrong, the same thing a lot of times wrong. And so you may suggest that they should attend training and stuff also. Partially correct, this is when a lot of things are missing and you're not really able to get back to the numbers that you're supposed to. And this would be partially correct. this is a little bit generous. I would say at this point it would be incorrect because you're not able to give a good assessment of their compliance with the policies and procedures of PTA. You're not given enough information to make that assessment. And so that's very important. And I guess we'll talk about this later, but when you're looking at the audits, I've come across several times that there's a lack of leadership, and that would lead to either mismanagement or the perception of mismanagement. As an auditor, you don't want the unit to put themselves in a position where it may be perceived as, you know, someone, there's loss or personal benefit to someone. So what I've seen is there's a lot of people putting themselves in that position, but they really didn't personally benefit. Well, that's the same thing. And perception's reality if you believe it. And so if your unit sees that someone is signing everything because nobody else will do it, that's a lack of leadership and could lead to mismanagement. And that is a big deal and should be addressed in your audit. Okay, so and then we're down to the new part, the audit reviewed by committee. If your auditor is qualified, then the auditor would sign it, and we've discussed, and this is a future enhancement, but you may want to put, if you're qualified, that you are, because people won't know that you are and you don't have an audit review committee. And you should put under the audit review committee, not applicable. If you're a qualified auditor, sign the audit and say you're a qualified auditor, but still put not applicable for the review committee signatures and date. If you're not a qualified accountant, then you would need that review committee to sign it as approved and put their signatures on the bottom line there saying, yes, they've looked at it and they agree with the audit. Okay. And, oh, the findings and recommendations. Okay, like I said, there shouldn't be a lot of interaction between the treasurer and the auditor. There should be a pertinent written communication as deemed by the auditor during the process. If you're saying that you need something that they said they've given it to you, you know, put that in writing. Your opinion, and that's what it is, the auditor's opinion, should be based solely on the documentation that's presented to you or the lack of documentation that's not given to you. And again, judgment could be exercised. For example, it says all check requests have to have receipts. And while you may say no, you may say, well, you know, it was just one or two, so it's probably not finding worthy. A sample report. So for example, if you have a finding, it should not mention people's name. It should not be personalized at all. It should be just a statement of fact. So I'm giving an example here for example, check number 105 in the amount of $65 dated October 13, 2019 was not supported by receipts. And you may have, you know, several like that. You can list them all like that, because sometimes they say, well, what do you mean? I put in all the receipts, and then you'll have it there. Well, it was these, you know, that didn't have receipts. And then your recommendation is simply the procedure. All check authorization forms must include documentation such as receipts or invoices, which supports the amount of the check requested. So this would be an average finding and recommendation. Yeah. And so it's just saying what's missing and what the procedure is that would cover what's missing. Again, do not personalize it, and it should reflect the total independence of the auditor. You have no skin in this game. You are just reporting what you see. And you're really the last, I want to say your position is so important because you will be identifying weaknesses. And, you know, like people signing everything. And like I I talked about, lack of leadership. So you need to report all this because it's important to the future of the unit. Your unit is in business because the treasurer's done a good job and the auditor has done a good job of making sure everything and all the rules have been followed. So that's very important. The audit approval process, and if an audit is correct, there's really no findings or recommendations, then probably there's no need to present it to the president or the financial team. But if there's findings and recommendations, especially if they're assessed against the positions, and again, don't use names. You may use a position, like the treasurer, did this or that, but don't use, personal names. And so if there's situations where the president or some financial team members are mentioned, it's nice to discuss those findings and recommendations prior to submission to the executive board with the president and the financial team. Because we're not here to get you, we're not here to embarrass anyone or, in front of the executive board. They need to know what's coming. It's nice to give them a heads up, And so then after that, then you would submit, the auditor would submit the audit to the executive board, and you would go through the findings and recommendations report with the executive board. And then the executive board would approve it, and then the audit report only will go to the association. You're not going to drag in the findings and recommendations to the association. And if they say, well, what about these findings? They'll say those have been addressed by the board and will be, addressed. So, and then you would submit the audit report after the association approval to your council. Or if you're a council, it would be to the district. And then they would forward it to the district also. If the auditor is not available to present the audit, and we've seen this, the president presents the audit and it's, findings, come on. So if the auditor is not available to present the audit, then a member of the review committee, if there's a review committee, they may do so. But financial officers or the president or any check signers should not present the audit to the executive board and the association. It should be some neutral party, but hopefully the auditor can do it or a member of the review committee. Okay. Okay, financial red flag situations to avoid. And these are the same things that you need to look out for as the auditor, because there may be a risk of mismanagement. And like I said, most of the mismanagement that I have seen has been perception or lack of leadership. Rarely has there been personal gain, but that may be so. You are not investigators. If you feel that there has been personal gain or there's a situation that may lead to loss or theft, you can report that. It depends on who you think, but you can report that to the board or to the council. You report that to the council, the district. You do not take that upon yourself to investigate. That is not your job. You're just saying, hey, this looks kind of weird, and report that to your council and district, and they can take it from there. Okay, so some red flags are missing receipts for check requests. We've talked about that. And so listing, like low bank balance and danger of checks being returned for lack of funds. Why is that? And that's another reason for reviewing the bank statement. And meeting minutes not prepared. I wanted to go down to advances. Advances issued that are not subsequently cleared. So if you're issuing an advance, and I've seen this where, you issue an advance on check request, the check request is filed and no one follows up on the advance. And so advances need to be cleared by an advance clearance form with receipts attached. Let's say you got an advance of $500 and they're submitting like $400 worth of receipts. They will need to reimburse the PTA for the $100 that was not spent on behalf of the PTA. If there was a $500 advance and $600 was spent, then they would request a check for that $100. but I've seen where advances are not cleared and money has not been cleared. So for example, the $500 advance, you can see that they spent only 400, but there was no follow-up on the 100 that was not cleared. So you want to make sure those advances, if you use that, and they should be used rarely, are cleared. They should not be used for anything that can be invoiced. It's ordinarily used like if somebody's running around getting things for, you know, holiday boutique or something like that, that they're constantly giving money, you know, for people to buy things and then collecting those receipts. So it should not be used for everyday business like that can be invoiced. Another thing I found is the book fairs. You want to make sure that deposits for things like book fairs or fundraisers, if it looks reasonable. For book fairs, I know that they have reports off the register that you can use of checks and cash that's been processed during the day. But sometimes I've seen where they don't attach those daily reports, and there was a situation where when the book fair invoiced for their share, they showed a lot more revenue than what was processed through the cash verification forms. So you want to make sure, like, for example, World's Finest Chocolate, you should be making double of what is ordered. You pay 50 cents, you should get $1. If that doesn't look like right, then investigate that. So you have to look at the reasonableness of, especially fundraiser, if it doesn't make sense. And also PayPal funds, and we've talked about PayPal funds because there's been situations where the treasurer who draws down the money felt that funds weren't needed, and so they kept the money in the PayPal account without drawing it down. And that's not right. Drawdowns, you know, should equal 0 by the end of the month. That these funds need to be drawn down on a regular basis, and it should be reported to the executive board because this is money going in, and it needs to be drawn down in a timely manner. And like I said, if mismanagement is suspected, contact your next level PTA immediately for assistance. And no accusations can be made, and do not handle this on your own. Make sure all appropriate documentation is available to resolve any errors or submit to the insurance company. So you don't want to run around telling anybody, oh my gosh, you know, I think this is wrong. No, that's not your job. You identify it and send it forward to the council or the district. And financial situations to avoid. School staff members should not be a check signer. Some school districts forbid school staff members to be financial officers of an affiliated organization such as the PTA. So you want to make sure that it is best that school staff members are not check signers, period. And I know districts are different, but I think that's a good policy. And all PTA funding programs must be approved by the membership. Principals who request funds go through the PTA budget and approval process. The first thing I was told when I started PTA was that you're not the principal's checkbook. So you want to make sure that all requests for funds is in the budget and approved by the association. And so this is why you're checking in the minutes to make sure that the budget has approved, there's a release of funds, and that expenditures are made in accordance with the membership wishes. A current board may not encumber a future board. Contract should not be signed by the current president, which covers payments to be made in a future year. This is something where a current board cannot say, oh, I'm sorry. A current board cannot commit a future board to any kind of contractual obligations because the future board may not.
You want to pay one okay?
Absolutely. Oops. Can
I'm
we
sorry.
make sure we're muted, everyone? Except for Flora, of course.
Oh, okay. So you want to make sure that you're not encumbering a future board because the future board may say, hey, we don't want to do that, you know, and so it's important that a current board does not encumber a future board. Don't sign blank checks. You want to make sure that that the treasurers or any kind of checks are not signed without being completed. And then all financial reports must be attached to the meeting minutes to document the business of the membership. So we talked about the meeting minutes being so important that because it expresses the wishes of the membership and make sure that there's no expenditures that has not been approved. And so for further information regarding, okay, and so there's a toolkit, but I think Lisa has put on the chat the toolkit where you can get all of the forms.
Great. Flora, thanks.
Thank you.
We now have several questions, but the first one, I'm going to go backwards. This is the very last one that came in. And I can't scroll through these things, but it was brought up that somewhere there is a number 7 on the red flags. And I think there's a typo. The asker is saying do debit cards instead of no debit cards.
Oh, sorry, I typed that wrong. Yeah, I meant to change that. Sorry.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So we got that one taken care of.
Don't do debit cards.
No debit cards. Remember, the reasoning is all expenditures have to have 2 signatures. All expenditures have to have board approval pursuant to a budget, ratification by the association. All right, I'm going to start with the first question I believe that we have not yet answered. The previous auditor was not planning on doing the audit for the January-June period until September when the year starts. But she was supposed to be done by the time I start anything, right? I'm assuming this is the president or the new treasurer.
Yes, the audit has to be done before any kind of government filings is done for the year because you don't know if the information is correct or not. So taxes cannot be done, the RF1s cannot be done, any kind of government filings cannot be done until the audit is complete.
Great.
I'm sorry, Lena, I'm going to interrupt you. I was following the questions. Did we answer about the unit had to pay for 24 memberships from the previous year? What
Yes.
number goes? Okay, we did.
Oh, yeah, I thought that was private, but yeah, there was a question about our unit has to pay for 24 from the previous year. What number gets used here? I'm sorry, I thought that was a private one, so I answered it privately. But the answer was you state, or I'll let Flora correct me if I didn't do it. But what I told her was you would state the total number of memberships received, what was transmitted, and what has yet to be transmitted, correct?
Right. You report what actually happened. The PTAs are on a cash basis of accounting. So if something was missed the prior year, that's an expense, a remittance for this current year. So your memberships coming in may be 300, but your remittance may be 324. And that's fine because you didn't, because it was the opposite the year before. I just want to share also that any over remittance of memberships is not reimbursed, but under remittances are to be remitted to the council and the district.
Okay, the next question was, does the audit committee have to be assembled for the audit ending 6/30, or can just the elected auditor do it?
The insurance requirement was effective last year, and I think it was January, February. So the June 30th audit must be in accordance with the new requirement.
So if you're a qualified accountant, you can do it on your own. If you're not, then you get an audit committee. Okay, and how does all this work since we haven't been at school since March 16th?
Okay, so if all of the books are at the school, then you're going to have to, or the treasurer would have to arrange with the principal as soon as they can, to arrange to get all of the information and files from the school. Obviously, there's nothing we can do about that. And so they need to, the treasurer needs to make an arrangement with the principal when the school is open. That's just a fact of life, and that's the best we can do. Famous last words from CAPTA, from everything, is do the best you can.
Can the auditor from last year be the treasurer this year?
Sure. Because as long as they don't audit their own books, that's the rule. Don't audit your own books.
When you're missing something, are you able to send an email to the treasurer letting them know what's missing and give them an opportunity to provide them? If they were
th-
perhaps left out of the binder in error and they do have these documents, meeting minutes
Um,
as an example, is this correct?
Sure, that's why I'm saying to check in your things ahead of time. If something is missing, send an email, make sure it's in writing. If you find out later something is missing, sure, give them a benefit of a doubt and say, oh, by the way, I couldn't find this, do you have it? And just go from there.
Do expenses that are ratified by the board need documentation outside of the approved minutes? I'm not
Okay.
quite certain.
Yeah, expenses are approved by the board and ratified by the association. And the check request, theoretically, in a perfect world, the committee, for example, who's ever in charge of certain events, they should have an event planning worksheet that goes to the board initially asking for the money for, and it's broken down between types of expenditures and stuff. So the board would already approve an expenditure planning worksheet. Other than that, checks are approved by the board based upon the release of funds and the budget approval.
And I hope when the asker of the question is talking about documentation, I'm hoping that they're referring to original receipts, original invoices, that type of thing. Those are attached to the check request that the expenses are approved from.
Right, right.
Okay.
And so at your board, you would say, I want to approve check number so-and-so and so-and-so. They can question that, at that time and say, oh, what's this for? Do you have, receipts or whatever?
Please explain if a unit uses a cash advance form, do they also complete a check request reimbursement form?
I think the form at the state is a combination of a check request and advance form. I prefer for them to be separate, and I've done separate ones, but an advance clearance, that should be, I'm not sure if there's one at the state, but I've used one where, because the check request gets filed and gets forgotten, I would prepare an advance clearance form with the amount and keep it, we used to call it a tickler file, but keep it available to remind you that this is an outstanding advance. But I know the CAPTA toolkit, I'm not sure the check request is the same as an advance, if anybody knows more about that.
Okay, here's a good question. QuickBooks does not take direct payment from the bank account for their subscriptions, only credit or debit card. But you do not want us to use debit cards. Currently, our financial secretary uses their own card. What do you recommend?
No debit cards, no credit cards. I don't know how QuickBooks works, but that's the PTA rule. No debit cards or credit cards. So however way you can get around that, that's the rule.
Yeah, and then additionally, one should never use like Square or whatever tied to your personal account that you in turn transfer to the PTA. So it is, if you're using an electronic e-commerce system, you need to have that tied to your bank account, your e-commerce account, never to a personal account.
I have a question to piggyback off of that question. So if they use their own personal account or their own personal credit card, is that okay? And can they get reimbursed as opposed to using, if they're not accepting that? Is that acceptable?
Yeah, if you show that you've paid for something on behalf of the PTA, then yes, you can be reimbursed for that. I wanted to also mention that if you have PayPal account and stuff, you should never be paying out of the PayPal account. You cannot pay an expense from your PayPal account. You can only collect the monies and draw them down because you won't have approval to pay from a PayPal account. So They
Right.
should not be making payments, and I saw one before, they should not be making payments out of the PayPal account.
And then I wanted to follow up about all expenses have to be pursuant to a budget, pursuant to approvals that have been given by the board. So it's not just, oh, well, I'm just going to go out and buy supplies, or I'm going to buy, let's see, this was something, a treasurer had decided that every classroom needed pencil sharpeners. So she went out and bought pencil sharpeners and then asked to be reimbursed. It doesn't happen that way in PTA. You propose what you want to do. You propose your action, see if it's was it included in the budget when you set your goals. Then you either ask for an advance if you cannot advance the money yourself, or once it's approved, for you to do that, then you pay for the items, and then you seek reimbursement with original receipts. There was another question about, are the rules for the audit committee in the toolkit yet? And I believe they are.
Yes, I think they are. Yeah.
Right.
As far as having a review committee, yes. Again, they don't specify the scope of work or anything like that.
Right. Well, Flora, I believe we've addressed all the questions. If I have failed to identify anybody's question, please unmute yourself, maybe raise your hand, and we'll ask for your question. Anybody? We have 44 people in the room. That's wonderful. Kristen has a question, or Kirsten, I'm sorry. Go ahead and unmute yourself, Kirsten.
I just asked when in the chat when or if the audit committee rules are in the toolkit yet.
Oh, we just answered that one. Yes.
Oh, sorry.
Oh,
Okay.
yeah, just that there should be a review committee and how they should get on the review committee, but not the scope of work or anything like that. That's up to the units and the council, I suppose.
Let's see. We had another Kirsten.
That was me, Kristen.
Okay.
Oh.
Lemke.
No problem. It's funny. What are the odds, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
I had a question. You just mentioned, and I'm sorry if I missed it before, but you just mentioned original receipts.
Yes.
A lot of what's going on right now, because everything's distance learning, we get like people scanned receipts because they're not coming into the office to submit to us. So is that an exception?
The requester needs to mail those to the treasurer. So you can go ahead and pay if you believe to be you believe those to be reasonable and true, but I would still ask for the original receipts.
That's original. Okay, great.
Yeah, and the reason for that is receipts can be on different check requests. You want originals because you only want to process them once, and that's really only the way to know that you processed it one time. We have situations where receipts were not original, and the treasurer, really didn't look at them or didn't realize and process them again.
Oh, okay. All right. Good information. Thank you very much.
Sure.
Anybody else? Sure. Are you sure? No more questions?
They're sure, Lena, they're sure.
It is after 8, so go ahead and wrap up, Flora. Oh, I have another one coming in. Oh no, it's a thank you. Lots and lots of thank yous, Flora.
Oh, okay, great. Well, thank you all for coming. If you have any questions, my name is Flora Farzad. I'm at the district, what is it, PTA 33rdauditor.com, something like that. Anyway.
I put it at the beginning of the chat.
Okay.
It's PTA 33RD auditor at gmail.com.
Yeah, there it is. Okay.
Here is another question. If someone is making a purchase online, the receipt would be emailed. Is this still considered original?
Yeah, as far as like the Amazon receipts and stuff like that, those would have to be processed. But the treasurer, and you need to make sure that the treasurer doesn't process it twice.
Okay. Excellent. I want
Okay.
to thank everybody for coming.
Thank you. Thanks for
Yeah.
coming. Good luck with your audits.